You've witnessed wolf dances, breathtaking landscapes, stirring tales, and an Oscar shelf full of honors. However, a glaring error that somehow escaped editors, critics, and even the most ardent admirers is concealed right in front of our eyes. It's not a small omission or a background error. It's surprisingly clear once you see it. You won't ever view the sight the same way again after that. This blooper isn't like the others. It is concealed within one of the most poignant scenes in the movie. How could it go unrecognized for more than 30 years? There's no turning back once you see it, so stay put. Consider yourself familiar with this classic. You're going to start doubting everything. 10. A scene that is out of order. One of Dances with Wolves' most obvious yet frequently disregarded errors is a continuity fault in the movie's last scene. John Dunbar, played by Kevin Costner, is getting ready to leave the Sioux tribe in this intense scene. Even though the cinematography and speech are still excellent, a perceptive spectator might see an odd contradiction. Those around Dunbar are wrapped up in bulky, heavy winter garb, whereas he is wearing light clothing, no coat, and no obvious insulation. The obvious clothing contrast begs the question of when the sequence was shot and how the editing team managed to overlook such a visual disparity. Large-scale productions, particularly those as logistically complicated as Dances with Wolves, which was filmed over 108 days in South Dakota and Wyoming under harsh and fluctuating weather conditions, frequently make continuity mistakes. But because it occurs at a pivotal point in the story, this specific inaccuracy sticks out. Given the snow-covered surroundings and the clothing of all the other characters, the scenario suggests that the temperature should be consistently frigid. However, Dunbar, dressed more for spring than winter, seems strangely unmoved by the cold. This implies that Costner's and the extras' images were shot on various days, perhaps weeks apart, in drastically different weather. The fact that this error could have been easily fixed by altering the clothes or possibly by making an editing decision adds to its intrigue. Inconsistencies are typically fixed in post-production, primarily in relation to the crucial scenes. Therefore, the fact that this one made it to the final cut suggests that either the department failed to exercise proper oversight or that performance was prioritized over visual fidelity on purpose. It's also possible that there simply weren't enough time or resources to have this disparity resolved with a reshoot, given the feature's ambitious scope and very low budget. There isn't much emotional impact left in the movie when it comes to the detrimental effects of such errors. It's likely that wetness evokes an intense emotional response in casual viewers who are typically overcome by the breathtaking scenery and heartwarming stories they see. However, for those who can see it, it acts as a subtle reminder of the challenges filmmakers face when planning such massive productions in natural environments. It is a single shortcoming in a great movie. Fans and reviewers alike will surely enjoy the added behind-the-scenes intrigue. Wait till you hear what it required to manage thousands of stampeding beasts for a single sequence. Then you'll realize that a wardrobe slip is truly outrageous. The Buffalo Hunt is number 9. The iconic Buffalo Hunt is one of Dances with Wolves' most ambitious and technically demanding sequences. It took 8 exhausting days to execute and is often considered the movie's most iconic sequence. This sequence is a masterwork of scale and coordination from a cinematic perspective. The film's director, Kevin Costner, who also starred in it, had a grandiose and realistic vision that called for a great deal of teamwork, patience, and careful planning. It was practically unheard of at the time to shoot a buffalo stampede with live animals rather than computer-generated imagery, and it is still a rare achievement in movie history. The scene with the buffalo hunt was incredibly well planned. About 3,500 buffalo from the world's largest privately owned herd, owned by South Dakota rancher Roy Hauk, were used in the production. Wranglers would try to place the enormous animals by late morning, starting each day at 5 a.m. The crew had a limited window of 5 to 8 minutes each day to shoot the stampede since buffalo are erratic and challenging to manage. The crew made sure that no moment was missed by using pickup trucks and helicopters equipped with mounted cameras to record the event from every angle. Domesticated buffalo were employed for more controlled shots because actual buffalo were not safe enough to be used near performers. A tame buffalo named Cody, who belonged to a meat vendor in South Dakota, and a domesticated buffalo named Mammoth, who was owned by artist Neil Young. Standing 100 yards apart from the handler who held out a treat is said to have taught this buffalo to attack. This ingenious technique was used to film the frightening scene in which the character is nearly ran over by a furious buffalo while grinning a lot. It did, in fact, lend credibility to the tense atmosphere. Putting aside the skilled and trained animal, it also used animatronic buffalo for scenarios that involved injury or personal contact that were safely prepared. For these sequences, TIG Productions, Costner's production firm, had invested almost $250,000 in building such an animatronic buffalo. These realistic physical effects, when combined with foam rubber objects utilized in subsequent scenes, gave the film a depth that CGI at the time could not have. The buffalo chase is nevertheless a genuine homage to the artistic quality that only traditional filming can provide. Exceptional attention to detail, 100% high risk, and great payoff. One of the most memorable scenes in contemporary Western film is this one. 8. Mishaps on the set. Dancing with Wolves was a huge undertaking that involved both genuine physical danger and cinematic ambition. Even though the movie is praised for its expansive vistas and profound emotional content, many people are not aware of how many mishaps happened during filming. There were several risks for actors, stunt artists, and crew personnel, especially during action scenes and animal scenes. Not even Kevin Costner, who starred and directed the movie, was exempt. He was cut during a violent wrestling scene, among other injuries he received while filming. On a scene that required continual physical effort, his readiness to perform many of his own stunts put him at serious risk. Such creations were invariably dangerous. Unavoidably, the directors had to make the extraordinary decision to cast Mike Kenny, whose presence on set became essential despite his unsuccessful attempt to land an acting position in the movie. He addressed the actors' and crew's injuries as they happened and offered on-site medical care. This essentially illustrates how challenging the shoot was. Add to this the potential for an unpredictable atmosphere because the majority of the shoot took place outside, along with unpredictable weather, untamed animals, and occasionally terrifying scenes. The horse wrangler, daughter of cameraman Dean Semler, was thrown off balance while working with the horses on the scene when her animal became startled. This was one of the significant occurrences. The tragic nature of live creatures was illustrated by the severe damage she had caused, including 2 fractured wrists. However, that was by no means the biggest mishap that happened while filming. In a very sad turn of events, an extra was paralyzed after being thrown off a horse. This regrettable incident cast a shadow over the entire production and serves as a sobering reminder of the real risks associated with producing an experience this scale and authenticity. Even though they are unintentional, the mishaps provide Dances with Wolves a distinct legitimacy. It's also important to note that, despite the audience's praise for the film's epic setting and poignant narrative, obtaining that realism came at a genuine cost. During the production of one of these incredibly dramatic and visually gorgeous films, both the actors and the crew suffered actual injuries under difficult circumstances. This truth and the final product's beauty were hidden there. Dancing with Wolves was not just a creative challenge, it was also extremely risky from a physical standpoint. 7. Filming challenges. Dances with Wolves was a massive production with many production issues that pushed the actors and crew to their limits. Kevin Costner, the director and star of the film, decided to shoot on location at 30 separate locations in South Dakota and Wyoming because he valued realism over expediency. Although this choice greatly enhanced the visual storytelling in the movie, it also brought about a number of logistical issues. There were few contemporary conveniences or technological shortcuts available on soundstages, and the terrain was untamed and isolated. The fact that the production took place over a period of 108 days, from July to November, and that the weather varied greatly from sweltering summer days with temperatures of 100 degrees to icy winter mornings with temperatures of 20 degrees, made matters more challenging. For all parties concerned, these frequent changes made continuity challenging and produced demanding working conditions. Aside from wind and rain, the sheer volume of people on the set presents one of the biggest coordination problems. At that time, the world's largest privately owned herd consisted of almost 400 Native American extras, 300 horses, and an unthinkable 300-500 buffalo. In and of itself, managing and herding such a vast group of creatures is difficult and dangerous. It looks like an impossible undertaking to carry out in isolated locations distant from civilization and with erratic weather. Each sequence that needed these components to coordinate their movements was carefully prepared and choreographed. Whether it was the famous buffalo hunt or the combat sequences, a single miscalculation or even a second delay could throw the entire day's shooting into disarray. This production could scarcely afford the time and money that such delays cost. In fact, the animals proved to be extremely challenging to manage. Like any other stunt animals, the buffaloes were unpredictable and unmanageable, despite their magnificent appearance on camera. There were some injuries on set as a result of the horses' need for very skilled wranglers, yet even these wranglers occasionally struggled to manage them. Despite being semi-domesticated, the wolves had a feral nature. For everyone's safety, their instruction necessitated round-the-clock supervision and precisely timed cues. It should be mentioned that this was a long time before computer-generated imagery could realistically depict enormous creatures or scenes from nature. Every animal, every stunt, and every shot had to occur at the same time for the viewers to see what was shown on the realistic set. A picture that feels so real, grounded, and emotionally alive may be the result of all the difficult experiences. The production's idealism is reflected in the set's lived-in feel, raw landscapes, and genuine animal presence. Behind-the-scenes production headaches contributed to the scenario shown in Dances with Wolves, where, by the end of the film, headaches turned into victories. The success of that movie is a testament to the unwavering determination and resourcefulness of those who performed or worked backstage, who were prepared to face tremendous obstacles in order to produce a historical epic. 6. Joining the wolves in dance. The relationship that forms between Lieutenant John Dunbar and a wild wolf he named Two Socks is among the most memorable aspects of Dancing with Wolves. In addition to having a strong emotional impact, the wolf scenes are essential to the story's main theme, which is the relationship between humans and nature. It's possible that many viewers are unaware of how challenging those moments were to shoot. To maintain the reality of the story, director Kevin Costner insisted on employing actual wolves rather than computer-generated imagery or visual effects. Throughout the movie, two semi-domesticated wolves, Buck and Teddy, were employed to represent Two Socks. Even though they had received some training, they remained temperamental, erratic, and far from completely domesticated. There was a special set of difficulties when filming with wolves. Buck and Teddy were wild animals with impulses that could not be fully subdued, even though they were partly acclimated to humans. The very real danger involved was brought to light during a shot when one of the wolves reportedly nipped and chased one of the wolf trainers. This unpredictability meant that when trainers couldn't attain the desired performance, Kevin Costner occasionally had to step in himself. To keep the wolf calm and attentive during a particularly scary scene and prevent it from getting bitten during a close-up, Costner personally fed it a piece of raw flesh. Early on, the team discovered that food and patience were essential when dealing with wolves. Filming would occasionally pause to give the animals time to establish their emotions and actions, and scenes frequently required multiple takes. During other takes, the actors would even howl to get Teddy and Buck to react or engage. These wolves needed a more relaxed, natural approach, whereas other Hollywood movies often forced their dog stars to undergo extensive training. Undoubtedly, this went against the grain of an instinctive strategy. This undoubtedly went against the grain of a shoot that was already resilient. Nonetheless, Costner's insistence on reality paid dividends. In the end, they managed to capture something more authentic than any synthetic duplicate could have offered. A sensitive and unvarnished friendship that reflected Dunbar's developing reverence for nature and his new existence in it. Ultimately, the use of actual wolves in the film added a great deal of visual realism and emotional depth. The audience's comprehension of the character's transformation was improved since the journey of developing trust between man and animal behind the scenes became, in a sense, a part of the narrative. Although using trained stand-ins or special effects would have been a much easier option, using Buck and Teddy is still regarded as one of the movie's most audacious and inventive decisions. It made Tussock a character in his own right and provided Dances with Wolves a remarkable feeling of reality. Costner developed a number of real-life relationships while filming this movie, in addition to working intimately with wild creatures. One link extended much beyond the screen. 5. Kevin is Sue by honor. Kevin Costner's performance in Dances with Wolves brought him more than just praise from critics and box office receipts. Additionally, it allowed him to interact closely with Native American groups, especially the Sioux. The Sioux Nation found great resonance in the film's respectful depiction of Native American culture, which was uncommon in Hollywood at the time. The Sioux adopted Costner as an honorary member of their tribe as a token of gratitude and acknowledgement. This gesture wasn't merely symbolic. In an important cultural symbol of respect, a sacred eagle feather was tied into his hair during a formal ceremony. It was a heartfelt and significant recognition of the film's influence for Costner, who has always had a connection to Native American history and culture. As a result, Dances with Wolves was created with Native Americans from various countries. They included more than 150 Sioux extras from the Rosebud Reservation. Costner also made the decision to film the majority of the conversation in Lakota, out of a deep concern to depict Native life with respect and truth, eschewing all the archaic cliches that had long fueled Westerns. As flawed as that may have been, it was done to honor the story and give it authenticity. This Sioux embrace of Costner appears to have had a unique significance due to the sinking of borders. It is a rare instance of Hollywood and Native America reaching mutuality. But later, when Costner embarked on a contentious commercial endeavor in the Black Hills of South Dakota, a Sioux holy area, goodwill was strained. Costner suggested building a posh resort on property that the tribe deemed historically and spiritually significant in the early 2000s. Opponents believed it betrayed any respect he had previously showed. Costner initially pushed the initiative, which many believed ultimately undermined the sincerity of his prior stance on respecting Native ancestry. Those who had formerly celebrated his connection with the Sioux expressed dissatisfaction and criticism in response to this endeavor and the events that surrounded it. Costner abandoned the resort plans in February of 2013. But the man's relationship with the Sioux Nation was tainted by the dispute. Although many people will remember and honor his work in Dances with Wolves, his subsequent acts served as a warning about the difficulties in cross-cultural relationships, especially when it comes to property rights and business interests. The story of Kevin Costner's honorary status among the Sioux is one of remorse and awe. It served as a reminder that respect must always be upheld by both words and deeds. 4. They performed their own stunts. The physical performances of the actors, especially Kevin Costner, who not only directed the movie but also played Lieutenant John Dunbar, are largely responsible for the authenticity of Dances with Wolves. In order to create a genuine and engaging experience, Costner went above and above, doing almost all of his own stunts. Because viewers could plainly see that Costner was the one riding horses, jumping into action, or being flung to the ground, this decision gave the movie more believability. His commitment to executing these physically taxing scenes enhanced the film's sense of realism and enabled him to empathize more fully with his character's grueling trek across the frontier. The buffalo hunt scene demonstrates Costner's commitment to stunt work. Costner was pushed off a horse, but any other actor would have handed it to the stuntman. Rather than halting the action, he rode his stuntman's horse to complete the scene. A leading guy on a high-stakes production rarely shows this level of dedication, which was a testament to Costner's passion for the work. In order to capture the photo, he apparently used to work crazy hours during their so-called magic hour, which was an hour before sunset. It all paid off in the form of improved safety, cost savings for the crew and editing, and a more engaging viewing experience. Safety sacrifices were always required in the portrayal of Sioux life by the performers and crew, particularly with regard to horseback riding. Sioux people have reportedly ridden horses bareback throughout history, demonstrating extraordinary ability and amazing control over their mounts. But most actors aren't very good at riding horses. As a result, riding bareback puts his life in danger. The production company permitted the usage of saddles as much as they were disguising or concealing them in order to lessen that. In order to depict the reality of bareback riding on TV, a blanket was placed over the saddles. The filmmakers have been able to maintain a high level of safety while maintaining visual accuracy thanks to this ingenious technique. The producers' deliberate balancing act between realism and practicality was chosen by the choice to have the performers, including Costner, do many of their own stunts while deftly hiding safety precautions. These decisions ensured that needless risks were avoided while maintaining the film's historical and emotional authenticity. As a result, the film is visceral but reverent, with physical performances honoring and embodying the very real hardships of frontier existence while being aware of the risks involved in relaying its tale. Fort Sedgwick, number 3. The Dances with Wolves sequences at Fort Sedgwick are essential to setting the mood and plot of the movie. The barren landscape reflects Lieutenant John Dunbar's loneliness and the start of his metamorphosis as he arrives at the isolated, dilapidated outpost. However, viewers might not be aware that Fort Sedgwick's realism presented a unique set of production difficulties. The tiny pond that appeared in multiple sequences was the most enduring problem. The pond would frequently dry up during filming because of a persistent drought in South Dakota, which broke the flow and required the crew to regularly refill it. To keep the fort appearing to be located close to a permanent water source, vehicles had to bring in water every day. There was more to this logistical problem than just annoyance. It put the entire set's plausibility in jeopardy. The filmmakers were aware that water was essential to conveying the realism of a frontier military installation, particularly one as isolated and hostile as Fort Sedgwick. The location would have been unrealistic without a visible water source, compromising the realism that the movie so desperately sought to accomplish. Maintaining that tiny but crucial component consequently turned into a daily struggle against the elements. As crucial to the production as any camera operator or assistant director, the water truck demonstrated how many behind-the-scenes activities are overlooked by the public. Regarding a certain juxtaposition, the majority of Fort Sedgwick spectators have expressed similar opinions. What had happened to the soldiers that were stationed in the fort, and why had it fallen into such disrepair? In one version of the theatrical release, a pivotal deleted scene provides some required exposition, leaving the matter rather unsolved. It told us that the Native American fighters attacked the garrison without stopping. They took away the soldiers' limited mobility at one point by stealing their horses. Fort Hays ever provided troops in small supplies. As a result, the post was vulnerable and isolated. Their only choice was to leave the post since they had no way to protect themselves or escape. This missing plot point gives the entire movie's narrative, which depicts the perplexed situation of all the small colonies on the American frontier, a unique depth. Even though the spectator only sees the eerie remains of Fort Sedgwick and the metaphorical significance they have for Dunbar's voyage, the real tale behind the scenes filming is nearly as fascinating. The shooting of the Fort Sedgwick sequences perfectly captures the conflict between filmmaking and real-world challenges, from fighting drought to preserve the pond to removing important storylines from the finished cut. Second, when a director is aware of his desired audience. As the director and star of Dances with Wolves, Kevin Costner had a very clear idea of who should play each part. In the world of cinema, casting can frequently make or break a story's emotional effect. His first film as a filmmaker was a very personal endeavor, and every element, including the choice of actors, was carefully considered. The surrealist white woman who eventually becomes Dunbar's love interest, stands with a fist, was the subject of one of the most important casting choices. Costner was reluctant to select a woman who didn't suit his idea of the role, even though the studio had a number of females in mind. He preferred a woman with a discernible past and emotional depth for the role rather than a stereotypically young, attractive star. Someone who appeared to have actually lived. It's interesting to note that Costner did not initially choose Mary McDonnell, who ultimately got the part. She was 37 years old at the time, and at first Costner feared she could be too young for the part. According to reports, he was seeking a woman with wrinkles on her face, someone whose features could accurately convey the struggles of a woman who had grown up among the Sioux. Costner was adamant about realism and was concerned that a cast member who appeared overly polished or contemporary may take away from the film's genuineness. In the end, McDonnell's talent won him over during tryouts despite his misgivings. She was the obvious option because of her capacity to portray emotional complexity, resiliency, and vulnerability. Speaking multiple lines in the Lakota language, a condition that would have shook many seasoned actors, was only one of the hurdles McDonnell faced in her career-defining performance, which was specifically tailored for the movie. Her performance added that extra piece of nuance to a character that would have otherwise been overshadowed by the story's more dramatic parts, and her connection with Costner gave the movie emotional impact. Her character's realistic representation resulted from a casting procedure that prioritized content above surface gloss, a value that Costner upheld throughout the film's production. Filmmaking vision and aim are demonstrated through the casting. This approach was crucial to the film's ongoing success since Costner insisted that the actors be faithful to the characters' spirit and appearance. He took great care to ensure that every element of the production, from the settings to the people that inhabited them, was real and believable. First, there are flaws in the Lakota dialogue. Dances with Wolves stood out for its dedication to authenticity, particularly in its depiction of Native American culture. The choice to have a lot of conversation in the Lakota language, which was uncommon in Hollywood at the time, was a significant step in that direction. The film was one of the first big American productions to feature a Native American language so prominently, with more than 25% of the script translated into Lakota. This decision was praised for its respect for indigenous representation and was revolutionary. But even with the best of intentions, the execution wasn't perfect. Some male characters unintentionally spoke in the female dialect since the translation, although largely accurate, did not adequately take into consideration the gendered intricacies of the Lakota language. Gender-related grammatical differences exist in Lakota, as they do in a number of other indigenous languages. Men and women use some words and suffixes differently, and using the incorrect version can result in miscommunications or unintentional humor. Doris Leader-Charge, a dialect coach who was brought in from Sint Iglesia University, was heavily relied upon to assist translate the script and coach the actors because most of them were not Lakota speakers. But because she was a woman, she was more likely to teach the women's accent, and there wasn't much time or money to highlight or fix the differences with male actors. The error would go unnoticed by viewers who are often unfamiliar with the language. The emotional impact of the scenes is still clearly conveyed, and the delivery sounds as well as it can. Conversely, it was fairly obvious and even comical to Lakota speakers. The use of language and intonations typically associated with women by male warriors created a dissonance that appeared to undermine the authenticity the film was so desperately trying to attain. Imagine what else you haven't seen in your favorite movies if that blooper blew your head. Remember to give this video a like. Please leave a comment letting us know if you have ever seen it before, and subscribe for more hidden movie mysteries. To ensure you don't miss a reveal, press the bell. Click on the next video that appears on your screen while you're here. There are many more movie scenes that will make you pause and think.